Coming up, the Education Minister Bill Shorten on negotiations to get the remaining states to sign on to the school funding reforms. And NX Votes asks, can memes be an effective form of political protest? Now to our political panel. Joining me is Liberal MP Teresa Gambaro and Labor Parliamentary Secretary Kelvin Thomson. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon, Lyndall. Good afternoon, Teresa.
We might start on the economy.
Kelvin.
We might start on the economy. Kelvin, if I could start with you. Labor's running an ad, as we spoke about with Joe Hockey, on the question of the debt. Is this something that is actually concerning the Labor Party, concerning the government, the opposition, and has the opposition's attack on it been working?
Well, the opposition has been running a scare campaign in relation to deficit and debt, which is not warranted by the facts. Australia has a AAA credit rating and we have low public sector debt. And the fact is, if there was something genuine in relation to the scare campaign, the opposition leader would be willing to debate the Prime Minister over this issue. He was challenged by Prime Minister Kevin Rudd to debate him at the National Press Club. He squibbed it, and that's the truth of it. Our debt and deficit problems are minimal compared to those of other countries, and we are in a position where we can pay our debts quite readily and enjoy a AAA credit rating, one of only 8 countries around the world to do so.
Teresa, is that difficult to explain? If Australia's debt position is so bad, why the rating agencies keep giving Australia a AAA credit rating? Isn't the real question the capacity to repay that money?
Look, we have the Labor government has no economic plan and no strategy. In fact, we see reports today, and you mentioned in an earlier report, that there are expected write-downs of $6 billion in the economic statement that's due to come out. They have a spending problem. They're reckless. They've spent more than $120 million per year, more than we did the last year of the coalition government. And when you look at their record at the moment, we have $367 billion in revenue projected to be received this year, and that's more than $350 billion that they received last year. But they keep on spending and taxing.
The coalition will go to the election with spending promises, won't it? Tony Abbott's already foreshadowed a number of big road projects. There are other spending promises, and you're going to take to the election your own tax too, the levy on big business to pay for your paid parental scheme.
Look, our policy is to restore the budget to surplus and to spend within our means. And also the first thing we'll do will be abolish the carbon and the mining tax, which has put an enormous strain. We've seen electricity prices rise 17%, and we've seen increases all across the board. And the latest economic figures in the latest quarterly statement show that. So we're committed to putting the budget back into surplus.
Kelvin, one final question on this issue. Will Labor, in fact, because of the budgetary position, have to trim what it is promising to spend in the election? And will we see an election where both parties are promising actually not to spend that much?
Well, we are delivering fiscal responsibility. That is why we have a debt to GDP ratio of just 11%. That is the equivalent of someone with an income of $100,000 each year owing $11,000, only having to make repayments each year of $500. So we have been delivering fiscal responsibility all the way through. It is very hard to see how the opposition can make good on the idea that it can bring the budget back to surplus when every time the government engages in fiscally responsible measures, such as the FBT issue on motor vehicles, which you were discussing with Joe Hockey earlier, the opposition complains about what we're doing and says that they oppose it. They have all sorts of spending proposals in relation to the East-West Tunnel and defence and the like, and yet they say they're going to balance the budget. It simply doesn't add up. And the fact is that the opposition leader wasn't prepared to debate these issues at the National Press Club.
I might ask you both one final question on the issue on the economy. It's the issue of productivity. The Prime Minister was meeting business and unions again today. A lot of talk about productivity is focused on industrial relations changes, making workplaces more flexible. Kelvin, do you think there should be a similar focus on business managers also improving their own productivity at what can be done on the management side rather than workers' side of businesses?
There are all sorts of contributors to productivity improvements and productivity growth, and there's no doubt that business management skills is one of those. The area that I'm taking the greatest interest in as Parliamentary Secretary for Schools is lifting our skills base. If we are able to provide our young people and our students with a better education, lift their literacy, lift their numeracy, lift maths and science, Asian languages, all of these things will contribute to productivity growth and help ensure both the future for our students and the future for our nation.
Teresa, is there some work that can be done with business managers to show them how they could work smarter, be more productive?
Absolutely, but you've got to look at the record of this government. The greatest barrier to productivity is the increase in red tape and green tape that this government has placed on businesses across the board. They have introduced thousands of new regulations, and we saw only last week the FBT. No consultation with the industry. This is going to hurt community, charity workers, policemen, people on modest incomes, and already the charity sector has spoken to me about the concerns that they have in attracting people to work in that sector. No consultation whatsoever, and their needs. And one of the other things that they demolished was the technical colleges, which were working very, very well under the coalition government. That was the first step that they took.
We might move on now to the vexed issue of asylum seekers. Another 3 people died in the latest tragedy, this time off the coast of Indonesia. More than 160 were rescued, with up to 200 from Iran, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka and Iraq believed to have been on board that boat. As well, last night SBS aired allegations from a former worker at the Manus Island Detention Centre about rape and torture perpetrated by detainees against other detainees.
These young men who were considered vulnerable, which in many cases is just a euphemism for men who are being raped, they had to stay where they were.
Kelvin, you've had some concerns about the government's policy on asylum seekers in the past. Do you feel any sense of unease about conditions both at Manus Island and Nauru, the 2 offshore processing centres?
Well, I have every confidence, Lyndall, in the capacity of the Immigration Minister to investigate the allegations that have been made and to which you've referred, and to make sure that there is a proper response. I think the reports today of further drownings at sea only underscore the need for action on this front and for Australia to send a clear and united message to the world and to people smugglers in particular, that we are not going to allow this to continue. And I think that the regional resettlement arrangement that the government announced at the end of last week is an important response to an issue which has become more significant over time. I think it's fair to say in years gone by that I thought that this problem was greatly exaggerated and was being used as a political plaything. I don't think you can say that in the light of the deaths at sea which have occurred. I think that the compassionate response here is to discourage people from taking these dangerous boat trips and is to ensure that people who are in the United Nations refugee camps, that they are entitled to our consideration also and that they receive it. So I think that the measures that are being taken are appropriate measures, and they should not be the subject of undermining and white-anting by either the opposition or by refugee advocates, because it is really important that Australia sends a clear message to people smugglers and a clear message to people who are thinking about undertaking these dangerous journeys that it is unwise to do so.
Teresa, Labor is expanding the capacity, is expanding the numbers of asylum seekers that will be sent to Manus Island. A coalition government too would use Manus Island as an offshore processing centre. Why not give this a chance to work, see if it works, and if it doesn't and you win government, then change the policy and implement your own arrangements?
Look, what we've seen is the PNG solution unravelling. We've seen 5 boats arrived since the Prime Minister made the announcement.
Although some of them would have left before the announcement, wouldn't they?
Well, this is policy on the run, and we have seen an agreement with PNG that isn't legally binding. We have severe concerns about the capacity of Manus Island. We also, if the government was serious, they would send women and they would send asylum seekers there within 72 hours. This latest tragedy is a very sad one, but we have seen over 1,000 people die at sea, and this policy has very little detail. It's done on the hop. The Prime Minister announces these policies and then tries to work out the detail later, and it's unravelling.
Just a quick question.
There's so many more questions than answers in what's going to... will PNG accept all asylum seekers? Will they only accept certain types of asylum seekers? There are too many questions that are left open.
If I could ask you the question about sending them, as he said, within 72 hours, doesn't there have to be health checks, as the Minister says, time for immunisations before you send them to Manus Island? Isn't that reasonable?
It is reasonable, but I think within that time frame, the processing can occur. What that message does, it again sends conflicting messages to the people smugglers, and again, it keeps the people smugglers model on the table.
Kelvin, is the harsh reality of the way both Labor and the Coalition proposed to deal with the issue of asylum seekers that there is now no longer a solution that the public might see as a compassionate one? Any choice is going to be harsh.
The compassionate approach here, Lyndall, is to do everything we can to stop people from undertaking dangerous journeys at sea, and the compassionate approach is to also give priority to people who are presently languishing in United Nations High Commission for Refugees refugee camps. I regret that the opposition is displaying the negative approach that they are towards this regional resettlement arrangement. I think what we need is some unity of national purpose to solve what is a really difficult issue. It has been difficult here in Australia, and it's been difficult in other countries as well, and we need some common national purpose to address this problem. It is unfortunate, in my view, that the opposition is being as negative as it is, just looking to undermine and scuttle and white ant what is a serious and genuine attempt to tackle this problem.
But both sides call for a bipartisan approach, but neither side's willing to accept the other side's approach.
Well, we offered plenty of bipartisanship to the Howard government in relation to these matters. What we have here is a set of facts which require us to come up with a solution. We put together the Houston panel. I remember the parliamentarians who were very concerned about the deaths at sea in the middle of last year, and we got together talking about what are possible ways that we can address this problem. We had the Houston panel following that, and I've been a strong supporter of the recommendations of the Houston panel. We've seen our refugee intake increase to 20,000. The government has indicated a willingness to see this refugee intake increase if we are able to get this refugee resettlement arrangement in place.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Teresa Gambaro and Kelvin Thomson, thank you very much for your time.
Good to talk with you.
Thank you.
And that's Capitol Hill for now. Here's Matt Cargill with NX.